I was around 10 years old. It was late at night and my mom was just finishing up the dishes when suddenly someone knocked on the front door. Mom dried her hands off on the dish towel and walked towards the door. The impatient person knocked louder this time. When Mom opened the door, in walked a police officer. He came in and he closed the door behind him. "I'm sorry to intrude, but can I please sit down?" The cop asked her in a nearly panicked voice. Yeah, but is everything okay?" she asked him. He walked towards the table and took a seat. "Something happened," he said. Mom turned and looked at me. I was already staring at the whole situation. "Sweetie, this is your Uncle John," she told me. The cop turned to look at me, like he just realized I was there. I didn't say anything, and he and I just stared at each other. I knew he was nearly scared to death, and I wanted to know why. Mom went to pour him a cup of coffee. When she came back and placed it on the table in front of him, he reached out and grabbed her arm. "Please say a prayer to God for me," he pleaded. "Please, I don't want to die." "What happened to you?" she asked him. This is what he told her. He was driving along a country road where the ranches and farms are. It was a part of his job, I guess. It was at night, obviously, and his headlights were on. When he drove around the corner of the hill, something big was in the middle of the road. He slowed down, and as he got closer to it, he said it looked like the back of a giant man wrapped in a thick cloak. So he put the cruiser in park, rolled down his window, and had the spotlight on this guy. He thought the tall man was in some sort of trouble, because he was just standing there, and his shoulders were shaking weirdly. My uncle called out to him and didn't get a response. He was about to get out of his cruiser when just then the tall guy turned around to face him. When that thing turned around, it had the body of a large bird and the face of a man. It cursed at me and then spread out its wings and took flight and flew towards me. I put it in drive and never drove so fast in my life, Uncle John told her. Nowadays, when I see Uncle John, I always want to ask him about what he saw and where, but I don't want to offend him. Mom never talks about anything paranormal. She says such things shouldn't be repeated. Sorry, Mom, but I'm repeating it. I have been stewing on this story for a while now, I'm not gonna lie. I had a few drinks, so pardon the errors in rambling. I'm not the best storyteller. This takes place in New York, midsummer. It was my best friend's last day at his old house, which was filled with weird stuff. I've experienced stuff there and have a few experiences that can be boiled down to ghosts all the way to feeling like my life was in danger, which is why I refused to spend the night there, as that was when the feeling came. So this was their last day at the old house, getting all their stuff to their new house, and I was helping them that day. All I remember from that day is walking in the house seeing the windows filled with dead flies, like more than I thought could be in a house. And then driving to their new house at night, which had to be at least 8 hours of missing time, it felt like. I was confused and I asked them, "Where are we?" And I was told that we were in some town in the middle of nowhere on the way to the new house. I said, "But we never got the rest of your stuff." My friend's brother looked at me concerned and said, "Yeah, we did." "What happened?" I said. And I was just told that they would tell me later. This is a story best to come from their mouth, as I can't remember that 8 hours. It was just gone to me. And really, I can only take their word on what happened. All they said was that I was very quiet the whole time when stuff went down in the house. We're driving and we noticed that there are no other cars on the road, which is strange as we were going through quite a lot of small towns, and it was still early in the night on a Friday. The little brother mentions this, and as soon as he does, a bunch of cars come around the corner at this point. It's just circumstance, but there will be a pattern. We keep driving and we notice all the houses are completely empty. Like the lights are on, but we see no one in them, and no furniture or anything. I mentioned this, and boom, the next house we noticed, people are just standing in the window staring at our car. We noticed this in the next 3 or 4 houses too. At this point, we are pooping bricks and notice this drive is taking way too long. They only moved a few times over, and this drive was taking well over an hour, and it feels like we had been driving in a cornfield for a while. My friend says, "What the heck is going on? We should almost be there by now." And lo and behold, the cornfield ends and we recognized where we are again. Seeing a pattern yet, because I didn't, and I said something that I regret to this day. Man, what other weird stuff is gonna happen tonight? As soon as it came out of my mouth, I knew that I messed up. And my friend and his brother started yelling at me, saying, "Why would I say that?" And we get in a yelling match. We never argue, and my friend slams on the brakes. In front of us is what I can only describe as a big cat, like the size of a person with a head of an owl. Whatever it was, it struck so much fear into the 3 of us. His little brother, a 20-year-old dude who played football, just started crying, and I was on the edge like I was going insane. I wanted to be in a future scientific career, and this stuff wasn't making any sense to me. I was doing mental gymnastics just trying to figure this out. My friend just stared at it until he said someone grabbed their phone. His battery was dead from the time in the old house. This woke me up and I went to grab my phone, and whatever this thing was ran into the field into the darkness as soon as I started pulling it out. After that, we finally get to the new house. We pull into the driveway and back into their parking space. When his brother says, "What the heck is that?" we look up and see what I can say looks like a pure white Bigfoot, crawling around like a spider, and it has red eyes, and it just crawls away into the forest. We sit in the car for 45 minutes until their mother arrives. No drugs or alcohol were taken that night. Well, not until after we got into the new house. The best logical conclusion that I can come to is that there was a CO2 leak in the old house and we were having a group hallucination. This is by far the weirdest day in my life. I mention all of this now because my friend said the new owners of the old house have a for sale sign on it. They were there for less than 2 years. I was told that they had a thriving daycare there for about 1.5 years, and then suddenly, it closed down. Something that crosses my mind every once in a while is a weird experience I had as a child. I must have been 8 or 11 when I was talking to my friend in our apartment complex in broad daylight. As I was doing this, I saw a huge animal that resembled a wolf but much, much bigger. In Tacoma, Washington is where it happened. I would say it was either 2009 or 2011. I knew I wasn't normal. In fact, I stood there shocked the whole time I saw it. It was staring at me like it wanted me to see it. It's almost as if it had something to tell me and was trying or was communicating with me. I had a feeling that it didn't want me to be scared, and I wasn't. Just in complete shock as I locked eyes with it. All it did was slowly walk by until it disappeared around the corner. I would say it was maybe 5 feet in height, very large but not too much visible muscle, pitch black, bright yellow or red eyes. If you've watched Twilight, it looked very similar to that size and body. I don't think it's a dog, man, as its body didn't look human-like to me or hunchbacked. But also, it was so long ago that I can hardly remember specific details. And by the way, it was walking on 4 legs, not 2. I remembered when I finally snapped out of it. I struggled to tell my friend what I just saw as she had her back turned from the direction that I saw it in. I gathered all of my friends in the complex so we could go look for it, but found nothing. It's bothered me ever since, and I have a weird feeling as if I had a connection to this creature, and just want to know what it could have been. I was young at the time, but this experience was so strange that I can still remember it vividly. My family was looking at houses to move into, and we were looking at a house with a large backyard with woods behind it. My older sister and I had went off on our own and went to the back near the woods. I was looking into the woods when I saw a tall, white, slow-moving blur. I was looking directly at it, yet it was so blurry and unfocused that it looked like a formless blob. I looked at my sister and she told me to run, so we all ran back inside the house to our parents. I've never been able to find anything online that is similar to what I saw. This is something that happened to me and a group of friends during a sleepover in 4th grade. There were 6 of us, including myself. During the day, we had planned to go out at midnight and play Ghost in the Graveyard. When midnight came around, we all grabbed some flashlights from his garage and headed outside. We played for a while, and then the first creepy thing of the night happened. While we were arguing over who was going to be the ghost next round, we heard the sound of someone running down the road. He lives in a cul-de-sac neighborhood that not many people live on, and it was around 1 a.m. We shined our flashlights at the road and saw nothing. We kept hearing the sound of shoes on the road moving towards us. We looked up and down the road and saw nobody, and we were even able to shine a flashlight on the spot where the sound was coming from and follow it as the sound moved past us, and we couldn't find out what made that noise. Eventually, the sound of someone running on the road moved past us and we couldn't hear it anymore. We were all really confused for a moment, but we quickly brushed it off. We reasoned that we had to be missing something, and there was a logical explanation for it. We quickly forgot about it and started playing again. After a while of playing more, we were getting bored, and then one of us had the idea to go into the woods that were near his house and play the game there. Thinking back on it now, I have no idea how we were all like, yeah, that sounds like fun. So, we walked into the woods. It wasn't too dense, and we were looking for a good spot to make the safe zone. We walked into a clearing that was nearly a perfect circle with a rock in the middle. We thought this was perfect, and said the rock was the safe zone. So, we quickly got back to playing in the woods. We pretty quickly found the second creepy thing that happened that night. While we were playing, it was like there were other people in the woods with us, and everyone noticed it at one point. We would finish a round and someone would say, "Wow, I was chasing him when I noticed you in the tree. That was a crazy spot to hide." And then the other would look at him like he was insane and tell him that he never climbed a tree. He would ask who it was then and nobody could answer. Things like that happened every round. We would see people, and then when we were all together, we would confirm that nobody was over there. We noticed it, but didn't think much of it. And then, the last creepy thing happened as we were about to head back to his house. Me and a friend started to walk back, while the other 4 stayed at the rock and talked there. As we were walking, we heard the 4 scream and run towards us and then run past us. It scared me at first, but then I thought that they must have been trying to scare us. I looked at my friend and laughed, and then looked at where they had ran from. In the trees about 60 yards away from us, there was a figure peeking out from around the tree. It looked humanoid, but it clearly had a deer head. It scared the crap out of me, but I very quickly calmed down, realizing it was just a deer. And then I looked for another second and realized that it couldn't be a deer. It was humanoid, and I saw one of its arms, and it looked like a human arm. The antlers were black and very long and twisted. It was kind of just standing there looking at us. Me and my friend both ran back to his house. We didn't go that far into the woods, but holy crap, it felt like we had run for hours. We eventually ran back to his house and ran inside with the other 4. His dad had to come downstairs to yell at us for being loud, and then we calmed down. We started to talk about what he had seen. The kid that I was with said that he didn't know what it was, and one of the kids who was with the group of 4 said that he saw a demon. After that night, it became like a little urban legend for our friend group. So that's my story. It happened when we were in 4th grade, and now I'm a senior in high school, and I can remember it pretty vividly. None of my friends had any clue to what we saw. We had believed it was a trick of the light or something like that. I had been thinking about this recently, and I have the idea that it could have been a Wendigo. This happened in southeast Michigan, so I don't really know how likely it would have been for it to be a Wendigo. Anyways, that's it. I had just remembered it and thought it would be cool to share it, and maybe see what some other people think. Hey everyone, I live in South Georgia and I typically bike to and from work. I usually leave at around 10:45 and I ride my bike for about 30 minutes to get home, on a dimly lit road. Before I take the long ride home, I usually stop at my girlfriend's house, which is around a minute's ride from my work. On one particular night, my phone died once I had reached her house. As I was about to leave, we both felt a slight feeling of dread. She wished me a safe ride and I began the ride home. Just a little down the road, the light in the front of my bike died, which meant I was flying mostly blind. I stopped and turned on some small little lights on the spokes of my front wheel, so cars could see me for safety reasons. I know the road to my house very well, so I wasn't too worried about my light going out at the time. I'll skip forward past most of my commute since much of it was pretty mundane. My neighborhood sits behind a gas station with a restaurant, with a big parking lot on the other side of the road. Another important detail is that the sidewalk is on the side of the restaurants. As I was riding very close to the entrance of my neighborhood, I saw a large group of people standing in the parking lot. I rode by not saying a word. I was startled when I heard one of them yell something that sounded like, "Hey!" in a loud, forceful tone. I began to bike faster after hearing this. I didn't even look both ways or stop in front of the road. Rather, I just barreled through to the other side. As I looked behind me, as I was entering my neighborhood, I was horrified to see that the group of people were all chasing me on bikes. Terrified, I sped up even more through my neighborhood. I was very scared because I essentially had a beacon on me, with these spoke lights on my bike. My neighborhood doesn't have many straight roads, so I tried to lose them as best I could. I'm a very competent biker, so I managed to turn some corners very fast, and every time I looked back, I saw less of them chasing me. After making a very precarious turn onto one of these straight long roads in the neighborhood, I rode as quickly as I could. My house is only one turn away from the end of the road, so I tried to book it to the end. When I was a decent distance down the road, I took one last look behind me and I was horrified. There was this huge thing chasing me. It was very lanky and tall. My guess is around 7 feet tall and had a tall face. It also had very pronounced and long knuckles. I could not make out much detail other than that, but I definitely remember its pale white skin. It was running at me faster than I had ever seen anything go. I was going the fastest I've ever gone on my bike, yet it was still catching up to me on foot. It looked like it was exerting itself a lot by running that fast. It was leaning heavily into its run, and its arms were moving quickly beside it, with its hands into fists. I let out an audible yelp due to the immense terror that I was feeling at that point. I turned the final time into a smaller street and then turned into my driveway. I jumped off my still moving bike and threw open the door, which was luckily unlocked, and ran inside. When my mom went to see what was up, I told her that there was something chasing me outside. She ran to go lock the door, and I heard a noise that sounded like someone saying, "Hey," outside. My mom later reported it to the police and said that they patrolled the neighborhood at night for about 2 weeks. It was recently that me and my girlfriend were talking about this again, and we realized that that thing was running faster than any human possibly could. Do you guys have any idea what this thing might be and what it was trying to do? Any help would be appreciated. This is truly the scariest, most horrible thing that has ever happened to me. I have never been so petrified in my life. To this day, I still do not know who this man was, what he was trying to do, or if he still is where I saw him. I'm sorry for how long the geographical description is. I just want everyone to understand how secluded I was when this happened, and how badly it could have ended if it wasn't for my parents. I was back home for summer for the first time in a year after starting university. Our home was, and still is, just outside of a small town with forests all around. There was also a small man-made lake, which was diverged from a river that ran for miles through the forest, and ramified into a few streams east of the lake. Near my home, there was a small grassy path that led to the river following a stream. It was a long walk, but one that I used to go on often as a child. I knew the forest there well. I knew where I could cut through dense trees to meet the stream. The walk that I would always go on led me off the path, which turned northwest slowly, so away from the stream, and then took a sharp turn to the west. After a few miles walk, at which point the stream was hidden quite deep into the forest. I would continue to walk north and follow the stream through the forest to get to the river, and then follow the river west to get to the lake. It's easy to get lost in this forest because the terrain isn't just a slope down to the water. It goes up and down, and you end up completely surrounded by trees. I had spent many days wandering around there alone, or with my dad over the span of 18 years. I never saw anybody else in that forest. I went there twice that summer, both times alone-ish. The first time, I left in the morning. I walked along the path away from the stream to the sharp bend and then cut back into the forest. I reached the stream after an hour or so. As I was running my hands in the water, I heard a bell from far away, coming from the north. Something was making a bell ring fervently and periodically, which I found strange. I listened well, wondered if it was a lost hunting dog, and started moving towards the sound. I bloody know that I'd be the first person to die, but I was heading north anyway, so what the heck. I realized that it couldn't have been an animal. I could tell that the bell was too heavy, because of how clear the sound was to be on a collar. I kept moving, and the bell was moving away from me. It stopped completely after 5 minutes. The stream wasn't big enough or strong enough to carry a bell. That could have been enclosed in a tin or something, and the river was far too still. I thought of everything, but nothing explained the sound, apart from one obvious thing, which I just didn't feel comfortable with for some reason. I knew that it had to have been a person. I stopped thinking about it and just walked on normally. Until I found a badger, a bloomin' dead one, carefully decapitated. It had obviously been done with a knife. It was fairly fresh, the body was still limp, and there wasn't too much of a smell coming from it. The wound was full of maggots, but I knew that happened soon after exposure. The sound of the bell had been following the stream, and so had I. So the badger was put there, maybe attacked there, at least decapitated, while I was walking that way, I suppose, but I don't really know. Nothing else happened that day. 1 week later, I went back for the second time that summer, and the last time ever. I left home at around 6 p.m. Yeah, I know. I made it to the stream, and then walked to the river in an hour, and then decided to go back the way that I came because it was getting late and it was raining quite heavily. The sun set around 9 p.m. I was walking as fast as I could. The sound of the rain in the trees was surreal and loud. I was somewhat trotting with my head down for a while through the clearest and most open part of the forest when I bumped into something heavy. The smell was sickly. It was the decomposing body of the badger, with his head strung to his front paws. That area looked a bit like a ham because of the way that it was tied, just swinging from a tree, like an almost literal load of bullocks. It was his putrid bag of stench, wet and dripping green liquid. I started gagging. I had some sort of mucus-textured fluid in my hair. It was repulsive. At first, I just stared at it, slightly gobsmacked, and then I started fidgeting violently because I felt like I was drenched in its juices. I was soaking from the rain. My senses became confused. It felt like a bucket of cold ice water had been thrown over me when I realized that I had walked the same way to get to the river. So someone had strung the body up after I had passed it on their way there. Someone knew I would see it. So, was someone watching me and running around the forest, with the faint sounds of branches breaking around me and not animals? I looked around and started jogging. I was half running, half walking away from the stream back towards the path for a while, when I heard the bell again. I proceeded to call my dad while running. I told him to meet me on the path where it sharply turns west. It was the closest part of the path to me, to go as fast as he could and that someone was in the forest. I can't explain the feeling I had. It was like I had just crapped on my intestines and stomach. I literally felt the hairs on my neck raise despite being soaked. It was dark. I jogged as fast as I could. I was panicking because the path was still a bit far away, just too far to feel safe. It was still raining. Every single sound was muffled. I felt like everything was further away than ever before. The bell went on for way longer than the last time, on and off. I felt like it was surrounding me at one point. The fear combined with my compromised hearing and the fact that I couldn't flip and breathe properly was making me slightly lose my sense of direction. I was automatically heading southwest, but I wasn't really sure what I was even doing. I was breathing like a freaking horse, coughing my lungs up, kind of crying out loud like a toddler does, tripping over leaves and twigs like an idiot. I stayed on the phone with my mom, who was on her way with my dad. I kept hearing sounds, but I wasn't sure what they were. My mom was screaming on the phone at the same time that they were on the path, that I needed to run, that my dad had gotten out and was heading east from the path bend. I was terrified, so I went into survival mode. I was doing the half-running, half-speed walking thing again because I was out of breath. And then, I heard branches break. Clear footsteps for the first time from down in the forest, and the bell ringing louder. I didn't want to, but I looked over my shoulder. And that's when I saw what was in the forest with me. A tall figure creeping in my direction at the very end of the clearing, ringing his bell slowly in front of his stomach. I could tell that he was staring straight at me. Now, I don't know if I had a hidden secret sprinting ability or instinctual adrenaline-induced superhuman powers, but when I tell you that I ran for my life, I frickin' didn't look back once. I screamed as much as I could. I lied. I'm on the phone with the police. They are on the path. Dad, I can see you, I'm here. I wanted to yell, Dad, please, where are you? But I kept that to myself. I felt like something awful was going to happen. I felt like the man was right behind me. I kept telling myself not to look back. I was gasping and wheezing, crying so hard and screaming for my dad. I felt shivers on my neck, and then switched off and I just ran. I even dropped my bag and only realized that I didn't have it anymore when I was in the car. I felt like my phone was my only way home. things no longer felt real. It was like my legs were moving by themselves. I didn't know if the man was still following me. I could only hear my heart beating in my ears and the bell. I finally heard my dad shout my name, and I knew that he was coming my way, and that he could see me because of the intonation in his voice. I pretty much lunged myself at him when we got to each other. My dad heard the bell too. My mom could hear it on the phone. She was waiting with the car, ready to leave fast. We went directly to the police station, and I got medical attention soon after. My dad burst into tears in the car, said that he could hear the bell, and thought that he wouldn't be able to see me. Asked what if I didn't have my phone, what if he hadn't picked up. They were almost as terrified as me because they witnessed everything through the call. They could hear me trying to run, and they could hear the danger, but they just couldn't see it. The police couldn't really do much. They searched the area and the only thing they found was a folded t-shirt placed under a rock. I didn't really question that at the time. And my bag was not recovered. They said it was probably some homeless man living in the forest, but failed to realize what could have happened if my dad didn't know that part of the forest like I did and where to find me. I'm not blaming anyone. The entire thing was my fault. There are just so many what ifs. I want to believe it was just someone who decided to live in the woods and hunt or something. Maybe they were a bit mentally unstable and they felt angry that I came into their territory. But what if it was more insidious? The way that he moved towards me was abnormal. It was perverse because of how slowly he was ringing the bell. It's like he had me trapped. I didn't see any more detail. I just ran. To this day, I can't bloody go anywhere where I'll be alone, and the sound of bells is a real problem. The smell of moss as well. Anyway, my parents and Steve Jobs saved my life. So, go hug yours now and take decapitated badgers and bells as pagan signs that you're unwelcome. For a little background story, I've been a scout since I was 8 years old, and last year I was the leader of my team, so I had to do all the paperwork and calls for finding places to camp. It was mid-November, and I had to find a place to camp. But since I was lazy, I decided to wait a week before the actual weekend. A week before the weekend, I decided to call some owners so that I could have a place to sleep. As I call many numbers, all of the owners are unavailable or simply not here. But then I see a number which I never called before, since it was at the end of the list. I called and an old lady picked up the phone. I do the basic presentations and all, and she agrees to let me and my team stay at hers, and we are making agreements. That afternoon, I go to her property to check everything such as potable water, a place to put the tent up, and the campfire. The place is kind of dark, but it's nice. The week passes and Saturday arrives. The Saturday is going well. We had some great games, we ate a lot, and we had a good night show. As they go to sleep in the tent, I stay awake to finish paperwork for the next day. It's now about midnight and I decide to go to sleep because we have to wake up early to go to church. As I switch off the flashlight, one of my newbies, we are 8 in total, wants to go to the toilet, aka the tree, and asked me to come with him. I could understand because it's better to be accompanied at night, especially in the woods. He does his business and suddenly, I hear some noises far away, but not that far. I tell myself that it's nothing. It just must be some animals trying to find food. We go back to the tent and that's when I hear footsteps approaching. As I hear those footsteps, I remain calm and tell myself, maybe it's the old lady coming to check to see if we didn't make a fire too close to anything. But I still have an odd feeling because it's midnight and why would she do this at this hour? And then the footsteps go silent for about 10 minutes. But then I hear more coming to our tents. Thankfully, all of my campers are sleeping because they would have been scared. I was the oldest one and they were about 3 or 4 years younger. As I hear footsteps which seem to come from one person, I hear others coming from the back of the tent. And I thought, okay, this is getting weird. I need to do something. I checked the tent by the inside and thank God, one of my newbies left some embers from the fire. So I could see what happens between the fire and the zip of my tent. A minute passes by, and a silhouette is there just between the fire and my tent. I stopped breathing. I literally froze. I started to move towards my phone when I saw the silhouette coming closer to the zip of the tent. I sent a message to one of my bosses, who are always camping in the near areas if something happens. But I knew that she would take too long, so I had to think of something, and think fast. And that's when I had an idea. I put my alarm on like a big siren, because sometimes we do like night games and wake up in the middle of the night. So I put my bell on and my campers wake up. The silhouette had started to unzip, and I actually saw fingers from below. But as the silhouette heard everybody waking up, she or he sprinted back to where they came from. And that's when I saw 2 other silhouettes sprinting back in the same direction. Luckily, everything ended well. Around 20 minutes later, my boss came and stayed the night, and I never had to deal with those silhouettes again, thankfully.